Morning, everyone. Just doing a quick sound check before we get started. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. Colin, you're able to hear me okay?
All great.
Perfect. Colin, you guys can see that okay, right?
Yes, we're in business.
Perfect.
All right, everybody. So we will get this started. So hello, everybody. As our speaker sets up our slides, I will do a quick introduction to the session. So we welcome you to the Education Students Council Conference Week 2021. My name is Colin Brown, and I will be your moderator for the session today. In February each year, All Year 1 teacher candidates have 1 week of class replaced with 1 week of professional development. This conference week is organized by the Education Students Council in partnership with the Faculty of Education at Western University. We have 27 sessions this year. This is session number 24. This session is titled Alternative B.Ed Careers. We'd like to start off by thanking our speaker, Mr. Blair Tewartha. Blair, did I get that right?
Pretty close. Better than most.
Tewartha.
Yep, that's
Sorry,
perfect.
I missed that first initial R there. Okay,
Yeah, no
excellent.
problem.
So thank you so much for having us here. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time from your busy schedule to share your knowledge and expertise with us. So to everybody participating today, we've already read Blair's bio on the CW website, so you know who they are. This session will include a 40-minute presentation followed by a 20-minute Q&A discussion. So we ask that you please turn your audio and video off for this session on Zoom. During the Q&A, you can please type your questions into the chat box, and I can either read them out to Blair or he can read them himself. We'll see how it goes when we get there. In case we don't have any questions, we will hand over the session back to our speaker, where he can share any additional last-minute information regarding the topic being discussed. Finally, make sure you please fill up your check for understanding form for each session you attend at Conference Week this year. You can find this form on the Teacher Candidate Conference Week website under the session description. If you have any questions, you can contact the organizing team, and I hope we all enjoyed the session today. So Blair, whenever you're ready, you can now take over.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Colin. And thanks everyone for coming, especially on a Friday morning at 9 o'clock at the end of your reading week. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and thanks Colin and everyone else who set this up. So today we're going to be talking, actually I should introduce myself, I guess. So my name is Blair Tewartha. I'm an instructional designer at the Faculty of Education at Western University, and I was a teacher for about 12 or 13 years before this. So today we're going to talk a little bit about alternative career paths in education, some of the other options that are available to you as B.Ed graduates, other than teaching in a traditional classroom. And we'll talk specifically more in depth about instructional design, educational technology, and some of the opportunities and jobs, skill sets that you would have in that field. Before we do go forward though, I just want to do a quick poll. So Colin, if you don't mind launching the poll for me, when I've got PowerPoint full screen, it's probably a little easier for you. But we're going to do a quick room survey and see what you have as your plans for future careers. So we've got a little Zoom poll here. The first question is just, how do you plan to use your Bachelor's of Education degree? So are you going to be teaching, administration in a school? Is it just a prerequisite for a master's degree, or are you hoping for a non-teaching related career like a counselor or curriculum writer or something like that? Question 2 is just, if teaching is in your future career path, what subjects are you willing to teach? So are you willing to teach just your two teachables or your grade level if you're elementary school? Are you willing to teach any course within my area of expertise in the grade that I'm certified in, or anything they are willing to pay me to teach? And then the third question is, if being a teacher is in your future career path, where do you plan to teach? So just give a few more moments just for some responses to come in. Okay, it looks like we have, for the first question, it looks like we have a lot of teaching, mostly teaching. It's about 85% right now. And then I think it's starting to slow down. So Colin, do you mind showing the results? Unless they can already see the results. Perfect. So yeah, you've got, that's quite a bit, actually much more than I thought. So 85% of you plan to teach. And then you've got about 5% for administration and 10% for non-teaching related. We've got in question 2, looks like 55% are in any course within my area of expertise or grade level. 30%, 32% are willing to teach anything that they pay me to, basically, which is pretty common. That's how I was when I graduated. And number 3, it says, if being a teacher is in your career, it looks like 90% would like to be in high schools or elementary schools in Canada, about 5% abroad, 2% private school, 2% colleges or universities. Wow. And then 1% none of the above. That's actually much higher than I thought as well. When I graduated, there would have been a lot more students going abroad. Obviously, things have changed globally right now, so that might be part of what's influencing those results. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So we can stop that poll now. And the reason why I wanted to share that poll with you and kind of see where you guys are at is I wanted you to start thinking about other potential options other than what you had planned. So I know you all have this idea of where you're going to go and what you're going to teach, but I want you to keep an open mind into other possibilities and other things that might pop up. Another reason that I really wanted to talk about this subject, I did this last year. I was invited to come and speak on the same topic. And I was a B.Ed graduate at Althouse in 2010, 2011, so I was in the exact same position you're in, and I had no other options in mind. I had wanted to be an English and history teacher in high school since I was 16 years old, and that was my plan. That's all I ever thought I'd be good at, and I hadn't really considered any other options. And to be honest, not a lot of other options were presented to me. It wasn't really discussed. It was just assumed you were either going to teach in Ontario or you were going to teach abroad. So I want to talk a little bit about some other options for you today. I'm going to talk about that notion of a career plan versus a career path, and how small little things that you might do now or in the next year or two might define your career for a decade, even though you thought it was fairly insignificant. I'm going to talk very heavily, so most of this presentation will be focused on instructional design and educational technology as a career option and sort of what that looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about what you should watch out for, whether you're a teacher, instructional designer, no matter what you do in the future. I'm going to talk about some really important topics that you should be familiar with in education, no matter what you're doing. And then we're going to talk a little bit at the end about what else is out there, and I'll kind of go through a big list, not in detail, but just a brief list of all the options that you have as B.Ed graduates. So my career plan was very traditional. This might look familiar to a lot of you. I thought I would graduate with my B.Ed degree. I would become a supply instructor for high school, for a school board. I would get a bunch of LTOs, contracts, you know, put in my time, climb the ladder, volunteer, do whatever I had to do, and then eventually I'd be rewarded with a permanent teaching position. And that did not happen for me. So in 2010, for context, 2010 and 2011, the Thames Valley School Board was closed. You couldn't even apply as a supply instructor. So were many other boards in Ontario, especially in southwestern Ontario. And it was very difficult to get teaching positions unless you were willing to travel abroad or go to more kind of rural or remote areas in Ontario or in Canada. So a little bit about what my career path actually looked like. Before I even went to Teachers College, I graduated from my BA in English and History, and I moved to South Korea to teach ESL, which was a very common thing at the time. A lot of people were doing it, and I mostly did it for two reasons. One, I wanted to travel. I grew up on a farm in southwestern Ontario, so I wanted to see a little bit of the world, and I also really needed something to put on my application to my teacher education program. So I taught in South Korea. I loved it. I moved back to Toronto, Ontario, and continued teaching a little bit of ESL. Got my certification, which is just, you know, 1 or 2 month course. And all of this seemed like it was going to be fairly insignificant in my career plan. I never thought I would teach ESL again once I got into the B.Ed program at Western. I thought I would move on and teach high school English and history, and that's what I would do the rest of my life. And what I learned, well, first of all, we moved to Sudbury, and I was lucky enough to get on the supply list on the school board there, the Rainbow District School Board. And the one takeaway that I learned as a supply instructor is that you need to be very flexible and roll with the punches. I supervised classes that were, tech classes where students were using bandsaws, and I don't know how to use a bandsaw. There were a lot of things that I had to do that I was very uncomfortable with at first, but when you roll with that, it's just kind of part of the job, and you get really used to that and facilitating that learning, or at least just supervising it. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but there were some really good experiences as well. And while I was doing kind of the hustle of supply teaching, I applied for a part-time position as an English prof at Cambrian College, and it was just a 6-hour position teaching those mandatory English courses that all college programs have. So a lot of it is writing and grammar, teaching them how to write an essay, emails, that kind of thing. So while I was in the interview, the manager of the communications course was also the manager of the ESL program in the college, and it was very small and she wanted to grow it, but she didn't know anyone with ESL experience. So she ended up hiring me full-time at the college as both a college English prof and an ESL instructor. And that I kind of built the program from there with her. And what I thought I would never do again, which is teaching ESL, ended up being my career for 12, 13 years. I taught at Seneca, George Brown, Humber, both in ESL and in just college courses and college English courses. Again, it was nothing that I ever expected to do. And it ended up being most of my career. And once I landed back in London at Western's English Language Centre, I eventually started studying my Master's of Education in Digital Technology at Ontario Tech U, and that landed me in the field of instructional design, which again is another career that I didn't really know much about, and I never expected or planned to do. So what I want you to do now is just open up a new window in your browser, and I want you to go to menti.com and use the code 2806555, and I think you have to have those spaces. And I just want you to, in as few words as possible, explain what you think an instructional designer does. And we should see those results populate. I haven't used this specific type of question, but basically it's meant to be a kind of a scroll through. But yeah, we'll give it a couple minutes. And if this doesn't work, then I can probably move on from that. All right, I wonder, give it a couple more minutes, but maybe it's not working and I might just move on. All right. Okay, I might move on to the next slide. So the point of that one was that, instructional design is a very kind of ambiguous career. I didn't know much about it. I'm not sure if others know a lot about it, but it's hard to define even in the instructional design field. So I'm part of a lot of groups online, and they don't even know where or how to define it, or it often depends on where you work. So in general, the definition of an instructional designer is someone who focuses on learning development, building courses or lessons, or just learning assets of some kind. But that really, the details of that job depend where you work. So I'll talk about 5 main areas of instructional design. The first one is development and design. So this is where if you have any kind of, Photoshop skills, editing skills, Adobe Suite, graphic design, anything like that, it would come in handy. And what you'd probably be doing a lot of is developing lessons, content, learning assets, potentially building sites, and you're probably working with subject matter experts, and they're either giving you that content or you're designing it completely from scratch. Another common role for instructional designers is in the e-learning and IT field. This is where your technical skills, if you have, coding experience, if you're able to do that, or web development, or managing any learning management systems, that's kind of what you would do in that role. And this can be a bit more technical, but you're still involved in building courses and learning and that kind of thing, but there might be a bit more of a tech support role. In education and curriculum, which is where a lot of you would probably end up, you could be focused more heavily on curriculum, but it's kind of almost a blend between the e-learning field and the development field, where you might be building course sites, you might be teaching instructors how to use technology in the classroom, you'll be researching new practices, new educational technologies, or helping develop and provide feedback for curriculum and programs. And then we have the corporate and commercial role. Here, you're doing a lot more content development. So you're sitting in front of the computer, you're developing a lot of authoring, using authoring tools and developing content, demonstration videos, tutorials, things like that. So even if you imagine like demo videos on how to use your new iPhone, that stuff is often created by instructional designers in the corporate world. And then finally, we have human resources. So in this, it's more about professional development and training others. So here you're going to be focusing on, you might work in an HR department and you might focus on employee instruction, training, assessing what skills need to be taught, and then figuring out the best way to teach that. And adult learning theories are really important in this role as well. So those are the major fields of instructional design. And I want to talk a little bit about the skills, or the soft skills and the more practical skills of what you should know as an instructional designer. The first thing that you should focus heavily on is learning models and theories. So you should know the psychology of learning. This is important no matter what field you're in. Adult learning theories and just psychology of learning in general. Any experience that you already have or that you can get now or in the future with learning technologies, authoring tools, web-based learning tools, learning management systems, all of that is really applicable. And even experience with presentation technologies. You know, it might seem simple, you know, everyone knows how to use PowerPoint, everyone knows how to use Microsoft Office Suite and, you know, Excel and all of that stuff, but very few people know how to do it really, really well. And if you can get that training, the certified training where you get a certificate saying you're at this level with this technology, that's really useful. A lot of you might have that from random jobs that you had before this or that you will in the future. And that can be valuable later on. If you have any visual or artistic skills, if you're into graphic design, or I know a few instructional designers who have made a career out of their passion for recording music. They, you know, had a synthesizer and a mixer, and they made their own music, and they brought that skill and that knowledge into their instructional design role in education. So they're kind of the experts on, you know, the best mics, developing a recording studio in your building, you know, video editing, all of that stuff. And it wasn't part of that person's instructional design training or education either. It was just a hobby. And that same experience, if you have experience with VR, AR, any coding, anything like that, it can be really relevant in your role later on. In terms of soft skills, if you're an analytical person, a problem solver, and you like to focus on improvement, seeing where you know, a system, a program, a lesson could improve and how to do that, then that's really well suited for instructional design. Effective communication, which involves patience as well. Remember, you are kind of this middle ground between, you know, teaching. You might teach someone how to, you know, upload a picture to their website, or, you know, someone who struggles with using email. And then you also have to talk to IT and maybe create training videos with them or for them. So somewhere in between, that's where you are. So you need to be able to communicate to all audiences in several different mediums. And if you have any kind of project management skills or experience or facilitation experience, that's also really, really relevant. In terms of what do instructional designers do? This is where I really wanted to go through things with you today, because it's not something a lot of people know. What does the day-to-day look like if you're an instructional designer in education? And this is true in K-12 as well as higher ed. But one big area or one pillar that you're going to be doing is course design and redesign. So as I mentioned, you sometimes will work with subject matter experts, instructors, curriculum writers, and you might design a course from scratch. You also might be given a course. You know, someone during the pandemic and the massive transition online, this was very common, where someone might say, hey, I have, you know, an entire semester worth of lectures in PowerPoint. How do I convert that to an asynchronous online module in our course site? So that's something that you would be responsible, working with the content experts and the subject experts and creating something that's interactive, that's digital, and properly designed. Another big focus, a big part of what I do is consultation. So you might meet with instructors or clients, and you're going to focus on e-learning strategies. What are some of the best practices? People might want to know what are some of the best tools that, so they might come to you and say, hey, I want to conduct a survey, or I want to conduct a poll, or I want to do this activity in my classroom. What's the best tool to use? You also focus a lot on online pedagogy. So what are those strategies? What are the learning theories behind those strategies? And what are the practical techniques? How do you execute that? And in case you're wondering what I'm doing today, a 40-minute lecture is not best practices for e-learning. It's just, what's appropriate for a webinar like this, but definitely not how I would teach a class online. And another big part of our job is technical support. This is not common in all instructional design roles, but it definitely is in higher ed, where you're troubleshooting, you're trying to solve problems that instructors or students might be having. Could be something as simple as a broken link, or maybe the settings aren't working or they're not appropriate. And it's a lot of learning management system management. So at Western, it's OWL, which is actually just Sakai is the actual name of the learning management system. OWL is the Western branded name. Other ones are Blackboard, D2L, Brightspace, Canvas. So you might be solving problems, and it's usually not on the back end. You're not IT, you're not fixing errors in the code. You're usually looking at settings, user error, things like that, where you can see it not on the back end, but you're able to solve those issues. Another big part of instructional design is client needs assessment and kind of audits. So there's a bunch of instructional design models. One of the most common ones, if you Google it, is ADDIE, ADDIE. And there's a bunch of other models as well. And what those models do is act as a framework for how you analyze a problem and assess the needs of a client. So imagine an instructor or a client comes to you and they have a problem or a project they want you to work on. You have to assess their needs, their learning outcomes and objectives and goals. You have to figure out what the deliverables are, so what you would be creating, what they'd be giving you, who you'd be working with, and then also a plan moving forward. And also solving any problems that they might be having. So it can involve a lot of project management and sometimes expectation management. Sometimes instructors or clients might want to do one thing this way, but you might have to say, hey, this isn't possible, or this isn't necessarily the best way to do this. Here's another option. Here's a workaround. Another part of instructional design, especially in higher education, is research and reviews. So you might be researching emerging technologies in education, and not just researching, but also figuring out whether they're something you would want to implement in your institution. So doing a lot of pilots, you run pilot programs, you might ask a few instructors and students to be involved in that. You're going to assess the pros and cons and do a review. And either recommend or not recommend that technology. And that's pretty fun to do most of the time. You're also looking at a lot of different online pedagogy and learning theories applicable to online learning. You're often doing research just trying to find solutions for client needs. And then a big part of instructional design, especially in the HR world, but also in education, is program review and feedback implementation. So you might help instructors or program managers set up a feedback process, collect that feedback from students, and then try to implement changes and improvements in the future based on that feedback. And then finally, the other piece to instructional design that's common in education is professional development training. Here you're focusing on teaching instructors. You're showing them how to use technology, how to use different tools, how to use your LMS. You're creating how-to videos, so a lot of production of assets there. You're hosting and facilitating workshops and training events and webinars and things like that. So that can all be a big part of instructional design in education as well. And another thing I wanted to focus on today, which seems kind of silly, but if you ever start applying for jobs, if you are interested in instructional design, There's a lot of different names for us and what we do. And sometimes it means the role is a little bit different. Sometimes it doesn't. Usually it'll involve a lot of what I've already talked about today. But one common, I'd say the most common term that's used instead of instructional designer is educational technology specialist. I've seen a lot of postings lately at Western and all over London, all over Ontario for this role. Another common one is learning developer or learning specialist or learning strategist. E-learning developer or designer or consultant. Those are all really common, even just e-learning specialist. There's another one, learning experience designer, and I think a lot of the times they focus on UX, so user experience and student experience. Content or asset developer, and digital media assistant or developer. So the reason I bring those two up at the bottom is because those are the common entry-level terms where it could lead to a really lucrative position and future in instructional design. But you start off with, you know, it's entry level. You don't maybe get paid the greatest, but you go in and you help create the content. You probably work with instructional designers. They might be overseeing the project, and you're actually just creating the content in whatever, you know, authoring tool or technology they decide to use. But those are really good positions to try to get into. Another thing to keep an eye on is our office did internships last summer for B.Ed and graduates and grad students. Pay attention to any kind of interns or volunteer. I mean, I hesitate to recommend volunteer positions because I think everyone should get paid for their work. But internships that are paid are really great ways to get something on the resume that's official, where you have an official title like one of these. Resources for instructional designer. Here are just a few common ones to look out for. E-learning heroes. So if you want to do a little bit of self-training, e-learning heroes is amazing for, there's an authoring tool called Articulate Storyline. They do a whole bunch of sort of demos. So they send out a weekly task for you to complete, and then you go in and you complete that task. And it's a great community, kind of an online community of practice for instructional designers and e-learning developers. Another one is the e-learning industry. That's a great site to check out, as well as the Canadian Association of Instructional Designers. This last one is not very informative for the role, but there's a million job postings. So it's Canadian specific, and that's where you'll find a lot of job postings. In terms of designing, and I recommend this for not just instructional designers, but teachers, anytime you develop anything online for your students, is Richard Mayer's 12 Principles of Multimedia Design. So he is an amazing scholar on design, and a lot of this stuff just relates to psychology. It's all evidence-based, and it shows you how you should develop your content in an online course. And then we have another one. This is just some great articles, the last two, for if you're just kind of wanting to get into that, either right now when you graduate or after you've taught for a few years. So one is how to break into instructional design. That's just a great article on Inside Higher Ed. And then there's another one, how to become an instructional designer in 2021, which is Devlin Peck. They have some great resources, some great videos and articles on how to do that, how to transition into that field. Another one, this is kind of a mentor of mine at Ontario Tech University, Rob Power. He is a professor in that program, but he also is an instructional designer, and he runs his own company called Power Learning Solutions, runs a blog, has a lot of amazing videos and articles related to this for just teachers as well as instructional designers. And then this last resource, if you haven't seen this yet, it's called Kathy Schrock's Guide to Everything. It's literally a guide to everything, whether you're, no matter what role you have in education, she will have resources, a massive, massive compilation of links and articles and videos. And then finally, if you want to develop ed tech skills, you want to actually learn a little bit of the practical stuff that you would need to know. Udemy courses are a really great resource. They're super cheap. I've taken quite a few. You can take them on coding. You can take them on authoring tools like Camtasia or Articulate Storyline. And sometimes they're as cheap as $20, and you might get 60 hours worth of instructional content, and you get a certificate at the end, so you can put that on a resume and say I'm trained in Articulate Storyline or whatever you're looking at. in terms of tools to learn in education, especially if you want to go into the educational technology specialist or instructional design role, learn as much as you can about your learning management systems. So Moodle and Blackboard, I'm going to be honest, are a little bit, they've been around for a very long time, and I think a lot of institutions are steering away from them. They're going more with either D2L, which is, you probably know it as Brightspace. Also, Canvas is a huge one. The reason I want to recommend Canvas is Canvas is a newer one that's emerging, and a lot of institutions are taking it and using that now and moving to it. So Ontario Tech U recently moved. There's a few other universities in Ontario that use it. The nice thing about Canvas is right now, as anyone can set up a Canvas free for teachers account, where you can go in, you log in, you create your site, and then you learn how to use that management system, and you can develop courses. If you want to use it for an e-portfolio, if you want to use it for your practicum, you set up your own courses on here. You can play around with it. And then you can learn as much as you can about Canvas without actually having to work at an institution that uses it or get any formal training. It's an amazing resource. I still use it all the time. And then obviously Western's is Sakai, but I think only Western and Brock in Ontario use Sakai or OWL. But yeah, it's another good one to learn as well. And then finally, authoring tools. These are the big four. Articulate, Storyline, and Rise. I'd say that is the best route to go if you want to develop content. We have instructors who use this themselves, and they have their own licenses, or a lot of instructional designers and digital media developers use it. Camtasia is another one. It's if you think of like screencasts and recorded tutorials, they're often done in Camtasia. If you want a free one, Screencast-O-Matic is free and easy, and it's web-based. Camtasia is a lot more robust, and it's probably only maybe $100 or $200, and you get your own personal license. And it's pretty amazing what you can do with it. Adobe Captivate was really popular. It still is, but it's less popular now. And then Vyond. Vyond is a really good one for the animated videos, those ones that, Powtoons and all that, Toonly. Vyond is more robust and a little bit more modern, in my opinion. So that's a good one to learn as well. And you could learn it in a couple days. You could learn how to create some good videos, and then after that, it's quite fast. So finally, what some of you might want to know, I'm just going to check the time. Okay, I'll go through this part quickly. Some teaching alternatives to Ontario school boards. So we'll get out of instructional design, we'll get out of teaching in Ontario school boards. There's a lot of options, things that I've kind of dabbled in my teaching career, or just have colleagues who have. Obviously, the very obvious ones are private schools and tutoring companies and Ontario colleges, adult education programs. Those are all probably pretty common. But what might be a little less common are, corporate training, where you get a role in a company where you're teaching employees on specific skills or, different tools. Another one that's really can be a really good option is the justice system, as well as military schools. I had a colleague who taught in military schools for several years and really, really enjoyed it. I did my practicum alternative field experience, I think is what it was called. I don't know if that's what it's called now at Althouse, but I taught in an Ontario prison for 4 or 5 weeks. And that was my plan as well, was once I had done that volunteer experience, I actually wanted to do that as a career. The problem with that was the jobs were very hard to get at the time. There's not very many of them. They might only have 1 or 2 instructors in the entire institution. And in those roles, you're often teaching people from K to 12 to all the way to college and university level. And, you're working with adults, and you're kind of they're doing the modules as a learner paced kind of thing, and then you're helping them as you go. Alternatives to teaching in general, but still in the education fields. Obviously there's the really common ones like academic advisor, admin, curriculum writer or designer. Some colleges and universities will hire someone full-time to proctor tests, to develop them, to administer those. Corporate training, as I mentioned. RCMP is actually a big employer for B.Ed grads. They like to hire former teachers. I think part of that is the soft skills and the personality traits that sometimes come with that. the communication skills, things like that. And then government positions in related fields, so policy especially. Those are always really good options to explore. And then, instructional coordinator, training and development, and then a few others. These are some more common ones. I know some colleagues that have made good money creating textbooks and writing and working for educational technology, educational publishing companies. So another one is publishing house sales reps. So you travel around to colleges, universities, and schools, and you promote material from your publishing company. The nice thing about that is I've seen it done by people who have no teaching experience, and I've seen it done by former teachers. And the former teachers are much better at selling the textbooks and the tools because they've actually taught in the classroom. They've actually used the material. So that's a good one. Another one is social media or event coordinators for related companies. So another colleague of mine ended up landing a full-time job after teaching, working for Scholastic and running their social media campaign. And a lot of those, it seems like it's a social media job, and it is, but they want an educator behind that. They want someone with teaching experience. And then finally, what we talked about today, which is instructional design, educational technology specialist. Some of the things that I want you to think about, I'll try to run through this quickly. In the future, going forward, this was already, some of the things I'm going to talk about now are things that you should have known before the pandemic, but even more so now. It's kind of accelerated these emerging trends in education. So they're even more relevant today. So the first three are the pillars. Those are the ones that you should absolutely learn, whether you're a teacher, instructional designer, doesn't matter what you're doing. One is accessibility and AODA compliance if you're in Ontario. It is now law. It's required for all course sites, all websites, all content online to be accessible. So that means, closed captioning, alt text, descriptive links, easy to navigate, that kind of thing. Universal design for learning, so UDL is a really good one. What I love about it, it's proactive. You're not accommodating upon request. You're actually proactively designing a course site or a lesson plan or material that is accessible to all learners. You're actually anticipating any potential barriers for any student, and you're trying to mitigate that so that all learners will be able to access your content immediately and easily. And then digital equity. Remember, when you start planning your EdTech related lesson plans using mobile devices, all of that, don't take things for granted. Don't assume that, because everyone in your class has a smartphone that you can, that they all have the same quality of one. Some don't have data plans. And you need to make sure you're not excluding anyone because of lack of resources. And a lot of these other topics are really common, and I won't go into these too much, but if we have time in the Q&A, I'm happy to. But these are the common technical topics that are like emerging and really, really popular. So AR and VR, obviously. That one I wouldn't worry too much about. Everybody says it's emerging, but they've been saying that for 5 years, and I think the problem with it is it requires a lot of money and resources. But it is there. It's a really hot topic, and if you know something about it, it's going to be useful. Same with gamification of learning, user experience. Learning analytics is huge right now. And then I'd say in terms of theories, connectivism by Siemens. I think 2005 he developed this learning theory. It's a new learning developed for the digital age. So look into that. Problem-based learning is also really popular. And there's all kinds of studies from universities that have been using these theories, especially since the pandemic and the transition to fully online. And we're having a lot of success with those approaches, those pedagogical strategies. And then I have a little bit of advice for teachers. This is just based on my own personal experiences as a teacher for 12, 13 years. Don't be a teacher if you hate teaching. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. But you do see a lot of people who kind of, they think they want to be a teacher. They land up in the role. They don't necessarily enjoy it, or it's really, really stressful, and don't stay there. You're affecting human beings. And you're affecting yourself for your own well-being. There's a lot of other jobs that you could do instead of teaching, but are still related to education. Burnout in teaching is real, and it's subtle. I loved it, and I didn't realize I was burnt out until I started as an instructional designer. And then a few minutes a few days into my new career, and I couldn't believe the kind of stress that was brought down, the feeling I had. I didn't realize that I was burnt out as a teacher. Ask for feedback from students. They're your best resource to make sure you're doing a good job, and try to be humble about it. You're going to get criticism. Try to use that to become better. Formal and informal. Don't just do feedback surveys. And sometimes an in-person discussion with the class is just as effective. Use evidence-based practices, not just the new trendy buzzwords in education. Don't limit yourself to your degree. So we talked a little bit about that. Just because you were trained to be a history teacher doesn't mean that's what you have to teach, or the only thing that you'd be good at teaching. And then the last point here, anything could be resume worthy. So again, any of your hobbies, your skills, some job you had after high school or in your undergrad, you never know what's going to be useful later on, and what could be a talking point in an interview, a resume, or a cover letter. And then a final thought, I'll tell a quick story. I was, to end here. So this is just a kind of an anecdote, but my wife and I were camping up north near Elliott Lake. And we were driving into the provincial park and to go to our site. And there was a truck coming towards us with two older guys in it. And we did that quintessential Canadian thing that's kind of awkward, where you both you're not sure who should go because there wasn't enough room for both cars to pass. So I hesitated, I waved him on, he waved me on, we did that awkward thing for a little bit, and then eventually he insisted, so I went. Later on, we were sitting around our campfire, and these two guys happened to walk by. We got chatting, they introduced themselves, and they're fishermen. They're kind of local guys, and they started talking about what they said. Oh yeah, we're accountants or whatever. And they asked what I did, and I said I was a teacher. And the one guy said, "See, Carl, told you, educator." And then he told us that when we were meeting each other in the vehicles that morning, he said to his buddy, "Oh, I bet you he's an educator." And I don't know what that really meant, but my wife and I always thought that was a really funny story. And I think he was insinuating that, teachers are overthinking, or they're indecisive and not assertive enough, or, that whatever he was assuming about teachers as a personality trait somehow, or an identity. And I think that relates to our topic today. And what I want you to think about as a future teacher is, don't allow others to define your career or your expectations or what you do, how hard you work, or your professional identity. The difficulty in teaching is that you are very public, and you have a lot of people, parents, students, politicians, taxpayers. Everybody has an opinion about teachers, and everybody has a personal experience with teachers. Not a lot of industries have that. And that can be positive and negative, but just don't let yourself be defined by that. And you just kind of have to learn to deal with that as well. Also, there's no single definition of you as an educator. I am someone who thought I would be a teacher forever. I thought that's who I was. That's the only thing I would be good at, and I couldn't do anything else. And I've found I'm actually I did an okay job of teaching. I had good feedback, but I think I'm doing a better job of where I am now. And I'm exploring other options. And there's no single career path for you. I think you guys are much younger than me. You probably know this already. People move careers. The average is 4 to 5 years, and you might shift your career completely. Not for teachers, just for anyone in general. It's part of the way the economy works, and the way the knowledge economy works is you're going to be changing things. So be open to other plans in your career, and I wish you all the best of luck. And that's it for me today. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to explore things. Maybe I'll stop my share so I can see everyone.
So Blair, we do have some questions in our chat box here. I'm not sure if you can see them, but I'm happy to relay them out to you if you'd like. Otherwise, if you're like a little bit competent on Zoom and know how to operate the chat box, can you see the questions at all?
Yes, yeah, I can see those. I couldn't see them when I was presenting, so apologies.
Oh, no worries at all.
But yeah, so okay, so it looks like the thing did work, so I can go back to that later and check it out. Um, I think it was there's a lag between what it's embedded in PowerPoint, so there's a lag between what you guys see on the site and what I see in PowerPoint. So I probably should have just waited a few more minutes. But so the first question, let's see. Looks like the first question: do these type of positions still get pensions? So this is Jessica. So I assume you're referring to instructional design and those types of roles. Yes, they do. Again, it depends on the institution you work in. If you're in a higher education, like if you're working at a university or a college, you 100% get a pension, and you get a really good pension. And that's very helpful. If you're like me, you don't have a savings account, so you're relying on that pension later on. And I think a lot of corporations are starting to do that as well. Sometimes it's in lieu of benefits, other benefits. Sometimes you get both. I know if you're in an institution, you absolutely do if you're in higher ed of any kind, as well as the school board. Let's see, how can we get a copy of this PowerPoint? So I could, oh, it's being recorded. Okay, perfect. I could also send out the PowerPoint as a PDF or something if you want. Any other questions? Does a Section 23 teacher fall under a regular teaching position? So this is a teacher in group home or hospital. How would you learn about their expectations since they teach many students from different grades all at once? So, oh man, I wish I could answer, Jessica, I wish I could speak more to that. It's not something I have a lot of experience with.
I can expand on my question a little bit. I just
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was similar to when you were talking about you did experience in the justice system.
Yes.
So I wasn't sure if those teachers were considered Section 23s or I've worked alongside, I used to work in a hospital. So I've worked alongside with Section 23 teachers. So I know they were part of the board. And I was curious if your justice system one was as well.
I can't remember the details of that. I remember talking to them about it at the time, and I think you were recognized, you had to be certified. I don't think you were actually hired by the board, but you have to be approved by like Ontario Ministry of Education. The program is accredited, but I think you're paid by the government, and I think you're paid in a very different bracket. From what I remember, they said it was quite lucrative compared to getting like an entry-level position on a Ontario school board. So I think it might fall under a different category. And let's see, what's the next one? So are many of these alternative careers available to people with only a BA and B.Ed? Or would you recommend any additional formal training? Okay, that's a great question, Annette. If you're looking into instructional design, some of those entry-level positions you could potentially get with just a BA and a B.Ed, but you would probably want to try to have as much technical experience as you can. So maybe you get a micro certification on, Adobe Captivate or Photoshop, or you've got, authoring tools like Articulate Storyline. You do a quick training course, takes you a month or so, and you get a certificate on that. So that could go a long way, those technical skills coupled with your education and your B.Ed. Another option that's really, if you know for sure, hey, I want to become an instructional designer, there's a lot of certificate programs for instructional design in continuing ed programs, college programs. One thing you guys should be very aware of when I talk about micro learning and credentials, the idea that in order to change careers, you have to go do another 4 years of university or 2 years in college, that's just not really the case anymore. There's a lot easier methods for transitioning into new careers. One is simply certification. Sometimes it's a couple months, sometimes it's an 8-month course or program with 4 or 5 courses, and it's a few $1,000s. And it's much cheaper and much quicker than doing a formal degree. And that can be a really good option if you know that you want to be in instructional design or another career. So those certification courses, training programs, some of them are very cheap, some of them are very quick and easy, and you can do them online. And Another option, I guess, is if you guys plan on doing your master's. So if you want to be an instructional designer in a higher education setting, it's better, more beneficial if you have a master's as well. I kind of wish I had known where I would have ended up, and I might have skipped my B.Ed program and just gone straight to an M.Ed. But I learned a lot, and it, was responsible for all my teaching. So, but yeah, a master's in instructional design, a master's of education in general is really valuable in those fields as well. So I hope that answers that question. Leah, so what I enjoy most is creating learning content that is engaging, fun, interesting, etc. In terms of all this, what career is that? That's 100% instructional design. It's one major part of what you do, but I think if you like creating the content and maybe not as much teaching other people how to do it or facilitating the courses online, then I'd say content development. So you would look at the development, digital media assistant, content developer, all of that, that role of instructional design would be where you want to go. And learn authoring tools. Learn how to use Articulate Storyline and Rise, and learn how to manage a learning management system. That will be your biggest asset if that's what you like doing. And then Alyssa, so we have, can you talk more about your experience in education in the justice system? Did you work in adult education or in juvenile? Okay, yeah, so this again was a small part of what I did, but I learned a lot in that small period, and I tried to get into that role, but I couldn't afterwards. But where I was, it's from what I saw, you might have 2 or 3 teachers in an institution. This was adult. This was an adult penitentiary, and basically you had anyone going for, grade 1 or 2 level of education all the way up to university. And what they end up kind of doing is they're all in a room at a set time, and they all have their own independent modules that they're doing. It's set up very similar to an adult education program where every individual student is working on a different certification or course. They learn everything either on the computer or through textbooks and binders on their own. And then what you do as a teacher is you kind of go around, you're almost like a tutor, where you go around and help each student individually on whatever they're working on. I mean, I remember in that role, I had to try to help someone with long division, which as an English history major, I hadn't done since I was a little kid. And that was a challenge. But it's a really amazing experience. I think it'd be hard. I think it'd be pretty emotional, but I think it would be really rewarding as well. What else? Is it necessary? So Samantha said, is it necessary or best to teach in the classroom for a number of years before entering into instructional design? That's another really good question. It's not necessary. If you want to be an instructional designer in education, like higher ed or K-12, then it is really, really useful. Probably my biggest asset as an instructional designer is my teaching experience. You have 2 types of instructional designers and educational technology specialists. There's the one that is really, really tech savvy, went to school for computer science. They know how to code. They know how to use every authoring tool out there, but they've never taught in a classroom. And then you have the opposite, which is me, which I was an English and history major by training. At the time, I developed and learned a lot of technical skills, but I didn't have them when I was a teacher. I kind of learned them as I went. And then my M.Ed was part of my training. But my value, I think my asset is 12 to 13 years of teaching. I know what works in the classroom, what doesn't. I know what it's like to be on the spot. And I can empathize, I think, with instructors, the frustration of learning new technology when things don't go wrong, the amount of labor that's involved outside of your teaching hours. So it really depends. If you want to skip the teaching, then I recommend getting an instructional design certificate through like one of those 6-month or 8-month programs. It might cost you a couple thousand tops. You can probably even find ones that are cheaper and shorter. I would go that route if you want to skip the teaching. And then Madison, do you think it's manageable to do your master's while also being a supply teacher, or do you think we should pick one or the other once graduated? Yes, it's manageable. It depends on your life situation, Madison. For myself, I don't recommend this, but I was full-time employee doing my master's of education part-time and a new dad. And my partner is a midwife, so she's on call all the time and gone sometimes for 2 days straight. It's not easy, but it's definitely doable. And I think if you don't have family obligations yet, then being a supply instructor and doing a master's part-time is very doable. I would do maybe 1 or 2 courses per semester. A lot of them, I would focus on a master's program that's fully virtual. It's all online. And it's really convenient. So one I recommend, obviously Masters of Education programs at Western, there's a bunch that are online. But I did mine at Ontario Tech University, which used to be called UOIT. It's in Oshawa. They are very, very innovative. They know their whole thing is ed tech and online learning, and they've been doing it for in New Zealand that is asynchronous. And learning or on main campus or WTS, they might have opportunities. I know they're often hiring part-time students. They like to hire students specifically. And you get a lot of digital media, ed tech based roles and experience. It's a fantastic option. One thing we did at the Faculty of Ed last summer was we ran an internship. It was a paid internship, and I managed about 4 different people, and we helped instructors with that massive transition to online learning. That may run again in the this summer. If it does, I would talk to probably Anna or Zuber or Kathy Hibbert might know something about it, but it won't probably happen until June, July, August. But it's a great opportunity as well. And let's see. Oh, I hope I have time to answer all these. Which corporations or companies typically hire ID? What websites are best to look at? Check out that Canadian Association for Instructional Designers. They'll post all relevant fields. And then your general job searching, you'll just, instructional designer jobs in Ontario. You're going to get a lot of, I don't know that there's specific corporations or companies that typically hire ID. I think most do. Any that focus on online learning or demos of products, things like that, they will handle that. So it's hard to say which corporations or which companies would hire them, but most do. I'm trying to think of best websites other than that. I'd say that's your best bet. The Canadian Association for Instructional Designers, they'll just keep posting jobs related to ID. And then you can filter your Google searches and get alerts whenever there's an instructional design job. And a lot of HR companies hire instructional designers. A lot of, there's actually companies that solely develop online learning for schools. So if a university doesn't want to hire somebody like me or a team of us, instead they'll actually just outsource it to a company that creates the content for them, and then they just buy that online content. Regarding ESL, are there some degree certifications that are necessary? So yeah, ESL experience, TESOL Canada, if you want to teach in Canada, and it's actually recognized a lot across international and abroad, is your TESOL Canada certification. So it's teaching English as a second language. It's easy. Just make sure it's an accredited program. There's a lot of fly-by-night ones that you could do in a weekend, and it won't mean anything anywhere. But the one I did it took me about 2 months. I think it was about $1,000, 2 months full-time. And there's probably way more convenient ones now that you could do part-time while you work. But yeah, really, really good to get that certification. And then make sure it's, again, recognized by TESOL Canada and or TESOL Ontario, and that it's kind of accredited. But yeah, that's a great certificate to get. You also just learn a lot about lesson planning and teaching methodology. Are there training programs or tutorials available to learn how to use D2L or Blackboard from the educator's perspective? I haven't looked into that, but I'd be shocked if there aren't. If you did a quick Google search on D2L instructor training, and you could add the word courses or tutorials, and I guarantee you'll find, at the very least, you're going to find YouTube tutorials everywhere. Hopefully, you'll find some certificate courses. You could even contact the company directly. and ask for that. Blackboard, I'm not so sure. It's still used a lot, but I don't think they have free opportunities. The nice thing about Canvas is that you can just create your own account. But there should be material out there. And then Lexi, do you have any resources to help us find employment opportunities with the instructional design field? Are there websites that you can see job postings? So again, that Canadian Association for Instructional Designers, that's a great one. And then honestly, I look sometimes still at Indeed, and when I do Google searches, I filter it for instructional design, and all those terms that I gave, so in educational technology specialist, instructional designer, learning developer, if you tag those, you'll often get those emailed directly to you for companies all over the place, as well as schools. CELTA is a certificate for English language teaching. Yeah, that's a really good one too. So you can get TESOL or CELTA. It depends. And then, yeah, it depends whether it's recognized by like the European framework or the Canadian languages benchmark. But yeah, that's a good option as well. What else? We have, this has been so informative. Oh, good. Well, thanks. Okay, I hope this was helpful for everybody. It's 10 o'clock. Are there any more questions? Did I miss anyone in that chat? That was a lot of questions and a lot more talking than I usually do. Okay, I think we're good. Hopefully that helps. And yeah, if you do have any questions, like, you can reach out. I'm going to put in my email to everybody. It's my UWO email. Shoot me an email if you have more questions or you want some of those resources. I'm happy to share.
All right, Blair, thank you so much. This is an excellent presentation. And as I mentioned in the very beginning, we have had this, this was recording this whole time, so we'll be posting this on the Teacher Candidate website. And Blair, thank you so much for sharing your email. I'm sure that'll be super helpful for anyone who may like to get in touch. So thank you very much, everybody, and I hope we have a great rest of our day. Great weekend.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Blair. See ya.
Thanks. Yep. Thanks, Colin.